Hello everyone. Today we will be going over the third section of Chapter 11 in development. And so to begin with, what we'll be talking about is discussing adolescence. And so the adolescent period begins around 11 to 14 years of age and ends around 18 to 21 years. During adolescence, we observe youth to mature physically and physiologically through the onset of sexual maturity. And so what we often stereotype adolescents as always fighting with their parents, coming against all the rules, being very moody, and having just instability in their mood, always high, up, low, not always high, but highs and lows, and always changing. And so what we do know is that it is somewhat exaggerated. And so the stereotype troubled teenager may in part be explained and understood given the stages that Erik Erikson hypothesized. And so he believed that adolescents aged 12 to 18 years had to overcome the crisis of figuring out their identity or be in a state of confusion about who they were. So an example of this may be teenagers who are trying to figure out who they are, maybe during high school. So you saw those individuals that were jocks and cheerleaders and nerds, and maybe they were all three during high school. And what they were doing were trying to figure out who they were and maybe what they were going to do with their lives. And so you spend your high school years, even into college, trying to figure out who you are as a person, your identity, and who you are going to be. And so when it comes to social development within the adolescent period, as we discussed previously, adolescents maintain good relationships overall with their families, but we start to see a shift in their social groups. And so when younger children spend the majority of their time with their parents and families, and as children grow into this adolescent period, they spend more time with their peers and less time with their parents and families. So even within their peer groups, there's a shift throughout this period, transitioning from groups or cliques of the same gender to mixed gender groups into couples. So these peers have been found to exert a considerable influence on teens' beliefs and actions, whether those are good or bad. And so this adolescent period also includes developing a primary and secondary sex characteristics through puberty. So girls tend to hit puberty before boys, and around the age of 11 years old, most girls will be taller and heavier set than most boys. In addition to this, during adolescence, the brain also further develops. And so we see a process known as synaptic pruning. And so we talked about a little bit about this during the neuropsych chapter. The pathways in our brains that are not being used are essentially eliminated in a use it or lose it type of sense. So the end result is fewer pathways, but the pathways are more specialized. So fast forwarding to adulthood, this period begins around the ages of 18 to 11 and lasts for the rest of the life of the individual. And during early and middle adulthood, we see developmental changes occur, but they're less obvious. And so these changes include social development involving getting married, having kids, and changes within your family structure. So the height of everyone's cognitive ability occurs during this early to middle adult stage within adult development. And these include a good attention span, memory, and reaction time. So lastly, what we see with development in young and middle adults, they develop good physical abilities such as building up strength and endurance. So we do not see the rapid language development of toddlers, but the learning of more sophisticated words and the expansion of your knowledge base. And so we don't see these rapid changes, but they're still occurring, but they're less obvious. And so sadly, this is primarily observed in young adulthood, and what we see is that gradual physical and cognitive decline began around the ages of 26 to 30 years of age. In later adulthood, we observe physical and cognitive declines with age, yet they're often exaggerated in a stereotypical sense when we think of media portrayals of older individuals. And so typically what we may think of with older adults are difficulties with memory. And generally, older adults demonstrate difficulties with working memory, so memory with manipulating information or focused attention rather than long-term memory. And the gradual deterioration of the prefrontal cortex that comes with age is compensated by the brain's ability to take over for a neural structure that may be damaged. As a result, in later adulthood, we see a gradual decline in fluid intelligence, so maybe their problem-solving ability, and increase in crystallized intelligence, so knowledge for facts and words. So socially, older adults are observed to do the opposite of young adults in terms of spending less time with their peers and more time with family. And this interaction is more pronounced in later adulthood, but can be observed gradually from early to middle with the establishment of family, such as getting married and starting a family. So in addition to what we see within later adulthood is that we see a changing of goals in the roles that older adults fill. And so this is similar to Erikson's stages involving giving back to their community, their family, and future generations. And so Carnison and colleagues developed the socio-emotional selectivity theory, saying that older adults perceive they have less time to live, so they spend more time focusing on what makes them happy, as opposed to younger adults who are more likely to focus on acquiring useful information and making a life for themselves. So as a result, older adults are better able to recognize more positive emotions and are better at regulating or controlling their emotions, which comes with experience and age. And so with this really wraps up the third section of Chapter 11 and development.